Everyone, let's welcome Ari Levitch to Dragon Talk.
Yay, Ari!
Hello, all.
Very excited to have you here, Mr. Levitch.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
Very excited to talk about Witchlight, which I didn't realize until just saying this out loud. It kind of is rhyming of your name. Mr. Levitch and Witchlight. Mr. Witch, Mr.
Mr.
Light.
Levitch,
They are,
Witchlight.
of a kind, I suppose. Yeah, all right.
Is that why you were working on this?
I was very insistent that I worked on this for that very reason.
Well, it worked. It's working. We are
Sold.
glad. I am obsessed with the Wild Beyond the Witchlight.
That's good.
I
guess.
fully am. 100%. I'm in.
All right. So then we're done. Like my whole
Yeah.
job was to make sure that Shelley was into this. So.
Yep, and it
worked.
worked. I remember hearing about it like well over a year ago, whenever it was in the works. I'm like, that sounds like that could be right up my alley. And it is. I love all of the themes. And 8 is my favorite number. And I
Mine
know
too.
that's a theme. Is it really?
Yeah, it was always my number when I was able to choose a number for baseball or basketball. I always chose 8.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Is
you
there
are
a reason?
meant.
Is there a reason for 8?
I think it was like I just liked the infinity symbol-ishness of it. Like if you turn it on its side, it was the infinity symbol. There's a REM song called Driver 8 that I just got in my head for being young at that time. And because it's an important number in the Feywild.
And that's why, most importantly.
Particularly in the domain of delight Prismere. Because precisely its resemblance to the infinity symbol or even an hourglass.
Oh,
Which
hourglass.
was a code name.
Interesting. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin with this, but
Well, let's
maybe
talk about
we
maybe
can.
Prismere is a good place to start. What do you think, Shelley?
What?
I mean,
how do you want me to
let's-
jump into this?
Well, first of all, tell us what your role was working on this
Sure.
book.
So I was one of the writers on the book. So I worked with Chris Perkins and Will Doyle and Stacey Allen. We wrote the words in the book. So I was
Okay.
one of those folks. And I got
lucky
to do
you.
some like world building ahead of time. I got to work with Adam Lee and Sean Wood, and it was a blast to just spend some time in the Feywild and then create this adventure.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. So, good job, Greg. Good parenting. So Prismere, I guess we'll just jump into Prismere because this is, what I love about this too is that it's such a different vibe from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Like it's just like a nice palate cleanser once you finish another book that I was obsessed with as well. But Prismere, very unique, different. But tell us, like, if you were Rick Steves and you were going to encourage us to visit Prismere, like, what should we know about this beautiful place?
I mean, so first I'll just kind of jump off of what you're talking about with Van Richten's Guide, because Van Richten's Guide talks about, it goes into domains of dread within the Shadowfell. And so it's an interesting thing that you say this is kind of a palate cleanser because Prismere it takes place in the Feywild, which is a plane that is kind of in opposition, that exists in opposition to the Shadowfell. So where the Shadowfell is a gloomy place, kind of devoid of a lot of emotion and all this kind of, and it looks even desaturated in color. The Feywild is the opposite. It is this emotional outpouring of a plane. And instead of domains of dread, like you read about in Van Richten's Guide, there are domains of delight in the Feywild. And these are all kind of emotional expressions of the Archfey, that these powerful Fey beings that created their domains. And Prismere is one of those domains. And so the Wild Beyond the Witchlight adventure gets to explore that particular domain of delight.
That's so cool.
And yeah.
I love the idea. I mean, because I know reading old D&D editions, and especially things like Planescape, where there was these idea of opposite planes, right? Like there was the plane of of water, and then the plane of dust, and then you'd be like they would be in opposition to each other. I feel like that idea is now continuing here with this.
And kind of speaking cosmically, there is the material plane that that would be the equivalent of where we exist, and both the Shadowfell and the Feywild are these kind of very close mirrors of the material plane. And so that you got to explore a little bit of that in Van Richten's guide, particularly with focusing on the domains of dread. And so, now we get to go to the other side of that, which is the Feywild, and explore one of these domains of delight. Yeah, which is Prismeer.
So the denizens of Van Richten's guide to Ravenloft, all of that are very uber creepy and, as you were saying, like colorless echoes of things you might find on the material plane. That is true of creatures within the Feywild as well. Like they're more vibrant and full of emotion.
Yeah, and so I'm going to use this comparison a lot because it just helps, especially because people might have already read Van Richten's guide. So when you have the domains of dread, there's a sense that the dread lords whose domain it is kind of trapped within this, right? They're tormented by things that they might have done in life or kind of cursed in some way. Whereas like the domains of delight are kind of emotional reflections of the archfey that lives there. And the domain of delight is literally shaped, physically shaped by the whims and personality and nature of that archfey. And then there's the cyclical nature because then the domain itself kind of shapes the archfey as well. So in some way you can almost, while it's, this place of exuberance and it's this place of kind of raw emotion and kind of whimsy, there is this sense that an archfey also might be kind of beholden to that emotion. And so the sense that this is where some of the kind of sense of danger exists in the Feywild, that you're dealing with this with these erratic beings who might be able, whose behavior and mood might switch rapidly from one moment to the next. And that is true of the Fey, of Fey beings kind of across the board. There is this whole spectrum of emotion. You could have, rage embodied in Fey creatures called red caps, or you have, fear with like mean locks and things like that. And so there are all these kind of emotions attached to Fey beings, whether it's lowly Fey creatures or the most kind of extravagant archfey.
Oh my God. Okay, so first of all, I feel slightly attacked when you're talking about the way that these Fey creatures can change, or depending on their mood, things change. Because I actually do feel like I might be a little bit Fey in my house.
Does your environment change around you to reflect that?
If I'm not in a good mood, the house is gonna suffer.
The color starts to come away from the paintings.
Yes, like Quinn's action figures slowly start to melt. And
they start to frown.
Oh, I want to make that short film.
I know, right? They're not, when you say they're beholden to a certain emotions, is it just like wherever you are walking around in Prismeer, it's changing? It can just always change. Like I remember hearing flowers could wilt. Like if the archfey is feeling sad.
This is a Feywild kind of generality, with Prismeer being an example of this. But the Feywild, not just so. Domains of delight are very much shaped by the archfey, but the Feywild, the fabric of the Feywild, responds to emotion. So it's not just the archfey that have that kind of influence over the environment. And so within the Feywild, like you were saying, you might be walking around, but if you are distraught, the environment might reflect that to a degree. Like if you are in, if you are brooding, or if you're in kind of a bad spot and you're walking along, your footsteps might wither the grass that you're walking upon. But if you're in this kind of jolly mood, like the flowers might, come out and almost appear to be kind of smiling at you and things like that. So like there is this sense of everything is so connected to emotion and expression, emotional expression here, that it's just built into the fabric of the place.
So you could go there with very bad intentions and cause a lot of damage and destruction.
Absolutely. Yeah, again, as whimsical a place as the Feywild is, it's very dangerous. I mean, if you kind of lose yourself in indulgence, or you come across, fey creatures that are embodiments of those kind of negative emotions. And so there is a sense of danger that exists here that can feel hyperbolic to a degree. It could feel over the top in a way that where the Shadowfell might feel gloomy and might kind of drain you of energy. There's this kind of frenetic quality that might exist in the Feywild, depending on where you are, that kind of keeping up is itself its own danger.
So I'm getting some like bipolar comparisons here, right? Where Feywild is the manic episode and the Shadowfell is the depressive episode, right? Like you get, it's one drains and one might be too exuberant.
And there's something to the idea of connecting into, the way humans process information and process emotions. And so there's something that is very identifiable in that way, but at the same time, you're in a place that is not the material plane. So it feels different, but somehow recognizable. And so, yeah, I think you're touching on something for sure.
So as adventurers, now I know that there's a lot of rules to how you interact with the Fey inhabitants, lots of etiquette that one must, be somewhat knowledgeable about. Hopefully we learn some of that when we're at the carnival before we get to the Feywild itself. But for us as adventurers who are going to be exploring, it seems like a very difficult, challenging place to be in because of how much your actions and your mood can affect your environment. So are there like rules that we should be following when we're in there? Like just keep smiling.
There are rules, and a lot of it kind of, the way those rules are interpreted varies from individual to individual. Okay. So this is where it is different from, I think I touched on this a little bit in a previous chat about kind of the etiquette of the Feywild, but the idea of, the rules of reciprocity and hospitality and gift giving, these are all things that exist in the Feywild.
Love you.
But the way that those are interpreted, it depends on who you are dealing with and what is important to that particular Fey creature. But these types of etiquette agreements are different from contracts that you might sign, if you're in Avernus. So these aren't kind of letter of the law, minutia, kind of gotcha clauses. These are by interacting in this certain way, by participating in gift giving or being hospitable to a stranger. You are now kind of working within the rules of the Feywild, but it is not a lawful place, generally, the Feywild. There is this chaotic nature to it. And so again, the chaotic part of it comes from how Fey creatures interpret these kind of rules of etiquette. So when you're talking about gift giving and exchanging things of equal value, somebody might give you, you might want like this beautiful gem that a Fey creature has, and you've seen nothing like this in the material plane, and you just want this thing. And what they might want in exchange for it is, are kind of the buttons on the cuffs of your jacket, because they love buttons. You have no idea how much that's worth to them. And so discovering what they want is part of the charm of the Feywild.
Yeah, we went into a lot of detail about that.
I won't belabor that one again.
Which I love, but I'm glad you're giving an overview here. Definitely go back and look at previous episodes to get that. But I just love, to Shelley's point, like how players, the inciting incident of getting to the Witchlight Carnival is going to be the first kind of foray into learning some of these, hopefully some rules for the players, and so that when they go to Prismeer, they have at least a basis or an idea of what they might be doing something wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, if you are an astute participant in the carnival, there are things that will prepare you for your foray into the Feywild. Yeah, I mean the carnival itself is a fun kind of D&D experience, and it's fun for characters to kind of experience the carnival and experience the attractions and the games that are there. But yeah, if you kind of pay attention, it's also priming the characters, and absolutely.
Okay, good tip. Like maybe you should fill your pockets with all sorts of little trinkets, because you never know, like you said, you never know what they may, the people or the creatures that you encounter along the way might find.
And there are many opportunities to get trinkets unique to this adventure that are Feywild specific.
So,
I love the trinkets.
A question I wanted to know is, what you, the player, when the Witchlight Carnival touches down in your area, do you already know like that's a portal into the Feywild, or is that just something like you as a player just discovers, or is that like a well-known fact?
It's mostly the latter. It's this idea. So it is this, enchanting carnival that shows up every 8 years. It has this kind of beautiful procession of these carriages that are pulled by winged animals, and they kind of land and they set up the entire carnival. You go there and you have a good time. If you have a ticket, then you won't be hassled.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, within the Feywild itself, within the carnival itself is a Fey crossing. That there's a way to, wherever the carnival is, there's a way to get to Prismeer through it.
Okay.
And then the dungeon master can choose to have that be like a widely known thing, or that the players might know it ahead of time, but they don't necessarily know that they're going to get the going on into adventure. But it's a little bit like Descent into Avernus, when you're like, all right, we're in Baldur's Gate, but we know we're going to get to hell at some point because it's in the title.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, I think the joy of running this adventure is being pretty upfront about this is going to be the Feywild adventure. We're going into the Feywild to do some fun things. Now, the carnival itself can exist independently. That's part of the beauty of how it's written. Mm-hmm. Is that's not a thing you want to do, and you just want to have the carnival as an aside or something, or if you want to use it as a springboard for another adventure, you can do that. But for this, if you're like, we're going to be playing, the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, get ready, because you're going to be going into the Feywild.
So, if in theory, does the Witchlight Carnival always lead you to Prismeer?
Yes.
I mean, I know it does for this book, but is it always?
Fey crossings themselves are the way the material plane and the Feywild kind of exist. Is they're proximal to each other in a cosmic sense, and that means that there are places where the veils between the two planes are thinner, and there are crossings where usually they're kind of like mystical like locations, or like if you go through a ring of standing stones, you might not know that you have stepped from the material plane into the Feywild, but you go through it, and when you leave it, you're in a different place. And it has, there might be a place like the standing stones in the material plane has a mirror in the Feywild. So when you step through, you might not even know you've crossed over. But it might be a circle of mushrooms, or you might go into a cave and exit the cave, and you were in the material plane, and now you're in the Feywild. So that kind of stuff. So they're usually kind of fixed locations that go from one point in the material plane to the Feywild. The carnival is unique in that it travels around, but the crossing always takes you to the domain of delight, which is Prismeer.
All right.
Cool. So what's the hook for getting people to go into this portal? What is...
Mr. Witch just shoves you in there.
Yeah, right. I mean, it could be as simple as that. You could have just tripped and fell in if you got a particularly clumsy character who fails their dexterity check.
Candy.
But what's the inciting incident really for wanting to go in there and find out what's happening?
So there are two different major hooks, the options that you have when you're starting this adventure. And so the DM, working with the players, can figure out which one kind of best suits, the group. There is one where an old kind of warlock of Zybilna. Zybilna is the archfey of Prismeer, and there's a warlock who has a pact with Zybilna, but hasn't been able to kind of feel Zybilna's presence or contact Zybilna in any way. And so he contacts the players to try to go into Prismeer and discover what's been happening. There's another option where it's assumed that the players or that the characters have been to the carnival before, when the carnival was last when 8 years prior, like before the carnival, 8 years before the carnival has arrived, the carnival had already been to that location. And so this hook assumes that the characters have been to the carnival at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And while there, they were there without tickets. And if you're there without tickets, something of value can be taken from you. Okay. And so this could be, there's a whole table of what could be taken, but these could be something like, it could be something like your smile or the color of your eyes or something like that.
Oh, I'm
or,
just like thinking it's like my keychain or my teddy bear. Like, whoa, like really like.
Yeah. So these are things that you have lost, and you know that you have, you have this kind of tug that you have lost these things. So that hook brings you into the Feywild to recover what you have lost, because you had 8 years to kind of know that thing has been missing and it's been eating at you. So there are these two things there, and or two possible hooks. But a DM can find all sorts of reasons to push somebody into Prismeer.
So I've been, my daughter loves animals and loves, all things D&D for sure. And I've been hinting that, the next adventure is all about the Feywild. There's rabbit folk, there's Harengon, and, fairies. She's always had a fascination with fairies ever since watching Tinkerbell. And then I gave her a small D&D miniature of a fairy that she's lost many times. It always seems to find. So themes here are consistent.
Yeah.
So what would be some good ways in your mind to use this book that would be for a kids campaign?
So one of the great things about the way this was designed, and this is not necessarily like prescriptive in any way, but it was designed where there are ways to get through each encounter and each obstacle without combat. So if you want to have fun with, you could always draw your weapons or cast spells or do whatever. That's always an option. But it was designed in a way where if you wanted to play in a campaign that, let's say didn't glorify violence or anything like that, you can absolutely run through it with kids, and you can basically teach creative problem solving, which I think is a fun thing to do. And
yes.
you could show how much fun that characters can have with fey creatures, with these, bargains, and with these, with just playing up the quirkiness of the Feywild. So I think that's absolutely fun. And there are in one of the locations in Prismeer, you actually meet a group of children as well, who kind of have a tree fort that's built in the boughs of a treant. So it's adorable and it's awesome. So there's a lot of fun things to just interact with for younger players, but also just the idea of D&D isn't necessarily a fighting simulator game, that there are other ways to deal with problems.
So you can like really play up the fairy tale essence of this story for kids.
Yeah, ideally.
You can just like there's things that they'll understand, like fairies. You can be like, you can be a bunny rabbit. Who doesn't want to do that? And like, oh, we're gonna just go to the land where fairies are, which I think is great. But I also I was kind of interested in the idea of maybe just doing the carnival for brand new people, and just say like, hey, let's just spend an afternoon at a carnival, guys, and kind of get their feet wet that way. What do you think?
And that's really great. If it's a way to familiarize people with their character sheets in kind of in a low stakes kind of setting, and it is also just a fun one shot. It's just this is the kind of this could be downtime between adventures if you wanted to kind of drop in the carnival, or you can just have it as a one shot with people who have never played before, just to explain the idea of what role playing is. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I love that idea too of just, going back to the example of my daughter, we played, I think 3 sessions or 4 sessions of a Frost Maiden campaign. And then, life gets in the way and various scheduling monsters are unable to be slain. But now I just love the idea of just being like, all right, well, you still have those same characters. We don't need to roll up new ones.
Yeah.
And here comes a carnival. It's popped up in the middle of the Ice Age that, you can solve that later, maybe.
which is an amazing thing. You could even imagine, like, if you're dropping it in the middle of 10 towns and, the ground is all icy, but where the carnival is, it is this idyllic, beautiful place where, the grass is green there and there's flowing water. It's not all frozen over. And it is just a reprieve from the repressive winter that's there. And just sometimes players need that kind of release valve of just like, this tension's been too high for weeks and we just need that. And so it could be just a way to we're going to the carnival today. That's what we're doing.
Well, I love the idea too of the denizens of 10 towns going to this carnival and then being like, nope, we're not going back. We're staying in this carnival.
Oh, yeah, I would just go
that's
right.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes, just get a job, become a witchlight hand, and just travel along with it. Yes, it's just that's one of the things I loved about the carnival too, is that even if you don't play in the Feywild part, but just surprise your players in any campaign, and just bloop, oh, guess what? There's a carnival. Let's go play some games. And I also love that there's rules for the carnival games as well.
Yeah. So the carnival itself, it has attractions where you can go and watch giant snail races, and you can participate in. There are kind of giant dragonfly rides, or you can do these kind of attractions. But there are also a bunch of carnival games. So you can do things like you could participate in a gnome poetry contest, or you can try to outstare this illusory cyclops. And so there are all sorts of fun ways to just participate individually, or you can do these as a group, and you could have a fun time that way.
I've noticed that Twitter is just a buzz, and by a buzz I mean like two people, who have noticed that there is a very special snail in the story named Shelly Moo.
Are you one of the two people?
Okay, so three people.
That is true. That is correct.
Yes, very much. I appreciate that. I'm assuming it's not just a coincidence that there's Shelly Moo the snail. I'm going to just say that there's not. But I also love that Shelly Moo is the pink team, because of course that would be my team. So put your money on Shelly Moo.
Seeing the delight on Chris Perkins' face with when that was in the list of snails, it was wonderful.
It's a good snail name, Shelly. Get it?
My daughter's also named a turtle. A turtle stuffy is named Shelly in our house.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Anyway, that's one of my favorite things. Another reason why I love this book. So, Ari, if you were to go into the Feywild, which Fey guide would you choose to escort you? Or maybe you would just be like, no, I'm just going on my own. I'm winging it.
So the adventure features 3 Fey guides, but you could also, if you want to create your own Fey guides, you can do that. You could create whatever any type of creature you want to be a Fey guide, and it's usually a good idea to have one.
That was my other question. I'm assuming we would want a Fey guide.
Yeah. Okay. If you can convince one, or kind of do the right favor for a guide who can then help you get from place to place, that is usually a prudent move in the Feywild. And so I'm a little bit biased, because the guide I got to write is a little scarecrow named Clapperclaw.
Yes.
And Clapperclaw has these steel lobster-like claws, and has a gourd for a head that is filled with coins. And Clapperclaw can talk. I don't know exactly how, except I could say it's magical. But the gourd is not Clapperclaw's original head. And if you could help Clapperclaw find his head, then you'll be more inclined to help guide you from place to place.
Okay.
Didn't the last time we had a guide was I think Tomb of Annihilation, where I think when we played in that internal game, wasn't there a reality competition to find out who was going to be our guide? I like the idea of running something like that, right? Where there's 3 or 4 of them available to the party, and then they get to choose who is their favorite.
Oh, that's great. I like that a good deal. Because what that shows, if you can get into that kind of a place in the Feywild, it shows that your characters have achieved some sort of like confidence or mastery over the rules here and the etiquette here. So like that's part of the joy, is like seeing characters get to that, like, oh, I get it here. I understand how I'm supposed to navigate this place. There's just kind of like, when you first get there might be this Alice in Wonderlandy vibe to it, of just you are from a different place, and it is very clear based on the behavior of everyone around you. But yeah, if you can get to that point where you're interacting with a bunch of potential guides and you can choose one, and that's a pretty fun way to do it.
You mentioned travel too. Like how does travel work within the Feywild? Is it analogous to material world travel, or is it the type of thing where it can go really fast or go really slow depending on the mood of the travelers? Like,
yeah,
how plastic is that?
Travel is weirder in the Feywild than on the material plane. So on the material plane, you travel, you can look at a map, you can say it's this many miles or whatever, it'll take this many days to get there. The Feywild is a little bit different. Traveling on a road to a distant location isn't necessarily straightforward. It might, like, the road might change based on mood, based on other magical phenomena, and it's not so straightforward. Sometimes there are magical barriers between places. So, there are multiple domains of delight. I mean, there are tons of domains of delight, and that are not mappable. The locations those domains can kind of grow and shrink depending on the power of the Archfey. And it's almost like this moving patchwork of domains of delight. And not every place in the Feywild is even incorporated into one of these domains. So it is this kind of nebulous place, but there are things you can do to travel. You could travel overland, and if you've met all the conditions, you can get there. But there are also shortcuts that could exist that exist once you're in the Feywild. And these are kind of magical rituals that might help you get from place to place. So for example, if I'm whistling a tune and I walk around, this tree stump counterclockwise, it might be able to, that act of doing that might take me from one location to another location within the Feywild itself. And each of these little shortcuts have their own rituals. And so a DM can have a ton of fun creating these shortcuts as well.
And then giving clues so that they could discover
exactly
it, right? And like how that works, and trial and error. And we ended up in the wrong place. Now we have a whole other part of the adventure that we have to deal with.
Yep. Or who knows? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
that's
a good DM trick. If you're just like, I got to get him out of here, and just like, let's go, let's move on. Chop, guys.
All of a sudden.
Yes.
Yep.
That's awesome. This is going to be embarrassing, but I just watched the film Legend by Ridley Scott for the first time last night. I'd seen parts of it, clips, never really all the way through. And I was struck by how similar it is to how we're describing the Wild Beyond the Witchlight here. Like, especially that unicorns, like having those unicorns prancing and shot in beautiful Ridley Scott style.
Yep.
I was like, man, this is how I'm thinking of the Feywild now.
That's great. Yeah, I actually haven't seen that since I was a kid, but I know the scene. So yeah, that is fast. Now I want to watch this again. I have my own homework. But yeah,
it's worth it. It's worth it for those of you who are thinking about visuals, for sure. Because everybody's a little bit sparkly. Like Tom Cruise has got some sparkliness to him. Because he's a vampire, I think. Right? That's how that works.
Oh gosh.
We're mixing IPs
You're
again.
mixing your movies. Yep. Should we talk a little bit about the different areas of Prismeer?
Sure. Yeah, we can totally jump into the different areas. So Prismeer, as we talked about before, has an archfey, and that archfey is Zybilna. Now, Zybilna is not, or at the outset of this adventure, Zybilna is kind of missing.
Uh-oh.
And so in Zybilna's absence, the domain has been carved up into kind of three smaller kind of mini Fey realms. There's Hither, Thither, and Yon. And so Hither is this dank, swampy, marshy landscape. And well, I guess let me ask you this. What do you want to know about these places? Because I can go down some
I guess
some
just
rabbit holes here. Yeah.
I like having those broad strokes.
Yeah, just like real broad, like how they kind of are similar or different from each other.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they're very visually distinct, and there are themes that play out here. So we talked about the idea of, you know, there are hags. Okay, let me back up. So in Zybilna's absence, the three kind of splinter realms that now exist within Prismeer are each run by a hag of the Hourglass Coven. And so you have Hither, which is this, like as I mentioned before, it's this kind of immense swampy area. It has these kind of these waters that kind of rise and fall. So you have this added danger of whether or not you're going to get stuck in mud, or you're going to get, you have to navigate these kind of high waters. And that's where you can encounter Harengon brigands. And this is where we see them as things you can interact with for the first time. And then you have Thither, which is this kind of enormous forest, and it is kind of like this ancient primeval forest that's there. And the hag that sees there's a hag that oversees that one as well, and that is the guess I'm not sure if I should actually get into who the hags are. You know what? I'm not going to, because it is fun to discover.
But so yeah, you talked a little bit about them in the in our previews, but
right. Okay. So yeah, you have the hag there. So okay, I'm bouncing all over the place because I'm excited.
I'll let you go to the next one and talk about what Yawn feels like.
Okay, so Yawn has all of these kind of jagged, dramatic mountains, and it has these brooding storm clouds overhead. They're always kind of releasing, lightning, and there's all these, booms of thunder and arcing electricity with these huge pylons that kind of jut up from the mountaintops. And all that lightning is then directed to this enormous amphitheater that exists in within Yawn. And then in the center of all of it is Zybilna's palace. And so that is the whole domain of delight kind of radiates out from this central location.
That's awesome. I love how those names kind of map to past, present, and future. Is that kind of it?
Time.
That is precise. Yeah, that is precisely it. So Hither is basically is the place of the present. Thither is the place of the past, and then Yawn is the place of the future.
All that with the time and everything, it seems so cool. Hourglass, the figure 8 of everything. It's so cool.
Number 3.
Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, what's the number 3 have to do with it?
So 3, you have the 3 members of the Hourglass Coven. And visually, if you take a 3 and then its reflection and you put them together, you get an 8. So there are all these kinds of visual symbols and themes that kind of play out through the adventure as well.
So cool. And these come to life. These little parts, I've been lucky enough to see some of the maps that are included in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. And I love how these show off the vibrancy and color of this domain of delight.
Yeah, I just want to really compliment Stacey Allen and Will Doyle on their. Not only did they write, a good chunk of the book, but they did the maps here, and they did those maps, and they are amazing. I am so pleased with how they turned out. They always put a smile on my face.
They are amazing. There's so much to discover on those maps, and they're just people just audibly gasp when they see them for the first time. They're that good.
For sure. I mean, maybe I'm shilling Shelley and I's book so far, but there's one essay about maps that I feel like they are magical items. Like they are portals to other worlds, and that's on display here in this book for sure.
It's so strange how evocative a map can be. Illustrations are evocative in a different way, but the idea of seeing a place on a map and saying, I want to go to that place, it is, like you said, it's magical. There's something special about a map.
And the map of the Witchlight Carnival, I just want to call that out too, because I definitely have a picture of what that looks and feels like way more than, the 20 or so odd pages that are describing it in text form.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I have a visual now, and that cements everything for me.
And the map itself it shows, the layout of the carnival, but it's also an in-game tool, because there are parts of the map that you use to track time, and also to track the general mood of the people within the carnival. And so, the map was designed to be evocative, but show locations, but also be an in-game tool. It's wonderful.
And people watching it might notice a pattern of an 8, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Maybe. The carnival. Well, actually, no, I want to talk about this a little bit about the story tracker, because that kind of talks about something else that I thought was really cool with this, is that there is some additional guidance for maybe some newer dungeon masters who might be discovering or going behind the screen for their first time.
And that's part of the thing, like with D&D, right? Like there's this kind of mystery to DMing until you've done it. And so with our books, we're always trying new things to make a DM's life a little bit easier, and kind of make that first step a little less scary. And so one of the things we included this time around was a story tracker. It's essentially it's a sheet of paper that has relevant adventure information and who kind of has interacted with it, which characters have interacted with it, where certain things are in the world. And it's just very much basically like a best practices guide for running an adventure. And it just basically, helps you keep a lot of relevant information kind of at your fingertips at all time. And in addition to that, we're also trying out this thing where a lot of the NPCs have these cards in the back of the book, in one of the appendices, where it basically has a lot of role-playing information there. So if you have those cards, or if you print that out and you have those when you're going to be running a session with those NPCs, then it just makes that, it makes running them a little bit easier.
Yeah, the cards are super cool. I'm looking at them right now.
And we also mentioned the Heron Gone, and I read a little bit in a preview that is out in the wild right now. So go check it out. But I believe that it was your reaction to some imagery that is the reason why Heron Gone are in this book. Is that right?
Yeah. So the initial inspiration for Heron Gons, and particularly the Heron Gone brigands that then show up in the adventure, is medieval manuscripts have these little, drawings or paintings in the margins of religious texts, and this is called marginalia. And a lot of them, an odd number of them, I suppose, feature rabbit folk like holding weapons like clubs or swords or whatever, and just harassing monks or fighting. Sometimes they're fighting like almost like anthropomorphic hounds, or they might be jousting from the back of a snail. It is weird. But you get the sense that they are kind of a cruel and brutal bunch. And so it was from that I was like, I need to encounter these brigands on the road. Like that is the thing, that is an experience I want to write into an adventure. And from there, the idea kind of then kind of expanded into, well, what if we were able to play as one of these Heron Gons? And the idea that, not the idea of expressing Heron Gons as a playable race, kind of just made it into the book. And I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I want to play with a group that is like an Oops All Heron Gons group, and we're all kind of all these rabbit folk, and we're in the Feywild doing whatever. So.
Oh, I love that. What if they're all?
I would be in that group.
No, we're gonna have to do it.
So one of the things about them I noticed is it says Heron Gons are blessed with a little fey luck. Is that like supposed to be like a joke about a rabbit's foot being lucky?
Is that how you interpreted it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, everything is intentional.
Well, then they should be very lucky.
Yeah. I thought it was a play on rabbits tend to get lucky pretty often.
Yes, it could be that. I guess that could be it too.
It's awesome.
All of the above. Yep.
D&D is whatever you want it to be, Greg.
Right. And with each, like every player character, you can have, a Bugs Bunny type of Harengon. You can have.
I'm thinking like Watership Down.
A Watership Down. You can have a Fiver who's like a, priest of divination who is, no, things are happening. The sky is falling.
Yep.
And then it gets killed by a Warforged. I think that's how that works, right?
Aww. Or you can play, I would play like a Usagi Yojimbo character.
Yeah.
A ton of fun. Yeah.
So fun.
I got lots of inspiration there. Definitely. And of course, fairies. Who doesn't want to play a fairy? That's going to be real popular.
Yep. Yeah, I'm stoked to do that too. Like, there's so much fun you can do. And it's interesting to play as characters who are associated with the Feywild. Because what is their story, right? How what brought them to the material plane and then they're going back to the Feywild? Is that something they're reticent about? Or is that something they're excited? Like, there's a lot of stories you get to tell if you are starting as one of those characters.
Yeah. And I think that the same is true also for the Feylost background.
Yeah.
And I got super sad hearing Chris talk about that for some reason. I'm like, I don't want to be a Feylost now. I thought it was like, oh, that's cool. Like, there's great stories there. Like, I just ran away and went to the Feywild. But it's like, I don't know. Like, the way he described it was very melancholy, and now I don't know if I want to be.
And that is a thing. Like, when you talk about when you hear about the land of fairy in folklore, there is this sense of people who have been there or kind of fell into this magical sleep, and then when they woke up and things are different, or they left part of themselves in the Feywild. There is this weird thing that if you have been to the Feywild, that when you leave it and you return to the material plane, that things don't seem as vibrant, right? Like, you are leaving this place that is, for all of its kind of chaotic nature, there is this absolute beauty to it. And, when you step out of that, there is that sense like, oh, okay, I guess I'm back in the world, and I got to deal with my worldly things and my worldly problems. And so there is something about that, but that is melancholy. But that's where good stories are.
It is. I think it's definitely ripe with like good backstory. Like, why are you here?
Brigadoon.
Yeah. And like, also, I'm just still thinking about the idea of going to the carnival without a ticket and then having something taken from you. And then just being a character completely outside of this adventure, just anywhere, but like just knowing like, well, that's part of my background and that's why my eyes are blank or whatever.
Yeah, and
that's why I can't smile.
Even treat it, you can treat it as a side quest to recover that. So you can go as deep into the Feywild as you want. That's part of the beauty of how this is set up. Or you can run through the adventure as it's written. Like, it's
there's so many
I think it works on that level. Yeah.
So much good stuff.
I want to talk a little bit about a property from the 80s that involved going through a portal and then having the party members be transformed by that event. And it's something you said around, the Harengon or even the fairies or whatever, but how cool it would be to play maybe as your real selves, and then you get going to the Witchlight Carnival, and then you get transformed into something else when you're in the Feywild, and then having to deal with that, right? Having to deal with the transformation that comes from going through that portal, a la the D&D cartoon.
And I hadn't even considered that idea. I mean, D&D itself could be such a wide umbrella in terms of how you play it. And the idea of going from, I think I've said this before in other places, but this is how it helped me think of the Feywild, where like D&D is a magical place compared to our real world, right? And so when we were thinking about the Feywild, we had to, what is the fantasy place compared to the D&D material like plane? So it's like we had to think about that. So the idea of then, okay, take out that middle element, and it's just like we're going from our mundane world into the Feywild. Like, that could be bonkers. Like, that could be a ton of fun, especially if somebody who's never role played before, or they don't know fantasy very well. The idea of, what a warlock is or a cleric might be a little bit nebulous. But if you say, yes, you are going into this fantastical world, might be an interesting way to bring someone into what fantasy even is. I hadn't even thought about that.
I didn't either until just now. So now I'm totally going to run it that way for my kids, I think, and see how they deal with being their 10-year-old selves and 8-year-old selves being, a Harengon and a bullywug or something.
Oh, that's cute.
Great.
They would love
but
that.
I also love the idea of bringing back some of those older, 1980s characters. If anybody had any of the action figures from way back in the day, I know Bart's got a few of Warduke.
Still has them.
Yep.
Yes.
Those characters appear in this adventure, or can appear if a DM wants to use it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the fun things. We got to see the artist Darkin reimagine those characters, and just he did such an awesome job. And it's just fun to see them in the book. It's fun to see stat blocks for these characters, like really interacting with them in a tangible way. I'm super stoked about just getting to meet them. That's going to be really fun.
I showed this on Twitter, but I figured I could show a little visual.
Oh my God.
I had this costume that was just in the office for a long time.
Yes.
It doesn't say any name on it, except it says Paladin there. Paladin.
Which every kid wants to be for Halloween. Paladin.
But this is Strongheart, right? This is definitely the way Strongheart looks even with everything going on, including that amazing mustache.
I am sweating just looking at that, like knowing like how hot and unbreathable that costume is and how incredibly flammable it probably.
Oh no, it's not flammable because it's, I don't know if you can read this, but it's a flame retarded Collegeville costume, so we're good.
Well, at least they put that right on the front there. Good warning for people.
Totally going to use that when Strongheart shows up in.
Oh, please do that. Oh,
well, yeah. I mean, there's your cosplay. You're ready to go.
Yeah. And then if anybody's got those action figures, go ahead, drop them on the board, or at least give them some tactile something to play with.
Yeah, but that's another theme in here too, right? Nostalgia, like not just the real world nostalgia for people who might still have fond memories of Warduke, but also trying to recover your lost item from when you were a child. If you choose to go that route in the story, there could be a lot of...
that is absolutely part of it. And kind of the idea of watching the way kind of kids can lose themselves in their imagination and just like so fully. And that was definitely part of it. Going into the carnival, playing characters, going to a carnival is kind of a surreal experience, when you think about it. And just, it really plays to what D&D is about. It's this collective imagination, but with that is nostalgia because of that childlike quality of being able to do that. I think that I'm excited to play this with my niece and nephew to watch that as well and just kind of share their imagination.
I love too how, we were talking about the Feywild and how it's something you might lose or that Fey lost background. To me, the Feywild is a metaphor for losing childhood, to growing up. And I'm so glad that at least the three of us have never grown up and continue to play D&D and make pretend. And I wish more people out there were doing that. So that we're just by having this adventure and this story out here, I think we're doing a good thing.
Yes, we are. And this is a great story to remind yourself too. Yeah. You can still have fun and play make-believe and play. And discover
wear a silly costume.
And wear a silly costume. And be a bunny.
Be a bunny.
Be a bunny.
Yeah, with a cigar. Because why not? This has been so fun talking to you, Ari. I love how bouncing around ideas and getting to the heart of why things are in there and what's happening. And I can't wait for more people to check out the Wild Beyond the Witchlight September 21st.
Yeah, it's always great to chat with you, and I can't wait to actually hold the book in my hands, and
I know.
Hopefully we get to play soon in person.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But if case not, I'm available virtually as well. If anybody, I'm desperate. I'm desperate for a Witchlight game, please.
Yeah, we have to run the event or the carnival at least for sure.
Oh,
definitely.
Yeah. That should be like a happy hour activity.
I know, right? I'm practicing my ring toss. I'm gonna be really good at it.
I got my Mirage teleporting around.
Cheater.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ari. Where can people find you online? Where's your handle?
I am at Ari Levitch on Twitter, but I am kind of hermit-like, and I don't post a ton. But but that's where I'm at. So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, Ari, and can't wait.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you.